Today, we're diving into the story of a prophet who was, well, so much more than just a prophet. He was a man who literally built the foundations of civilization. We're talking writing, astronomy, city planning, but his most incredible journey wasn't on Earth at all. It was a calculated, mind-blowing trip to heaven from which he decided he was never coming back.
So let's start with a really interesting question. Can a prophet be a founder of worldly sciences? We often think of the spiritual and the practical as two separate things. But the story of Prophet Idris completely blurs that line. It shows us a mission that was all about building a divine society right here on Earth, before even thinking about reaching for the heavens.
His name is actually a huge clue. In Arabic, Idris comes from the root word that means to study or to teach. So right away, we know his title wasn't just prophet. It was, first and foremost, the teacher. His whole mission was built around education, around laying the groundwork of knowledge for all of humanity.
And when you look at the scope of what he taught, it's just staggering. He's credited with inventing writing and calligraphy, the very tools we use to record knowledge itself. He taught tailoring, moving humanity beyond just wearing animal skins. He introduced math, astronomy, urban planning, and even the basic framework for making laws. This wasn't just some spiritual guidance. It was a complete blueprint for a divinely inspired civilization.
But, building a civilization isn't just about science and inventions. It's about justice, and this is where the story takes a really dramatic turn. In the kingdom where Idris lived, there was this tyrannical king who saw a beautiful piece of land, and he decided he had to have it. The only problem? It was owned by a poor, devout believer.
Well, the believer actually stood his ground. He respectfully refused the king's offer, explaining that this little piece of land was the only thing his family had to live on. Now, for a king who had probably never heard the word no in his life, this was infuriating.
He goes back to his wife, fuming, and she comes up with this truly wicked plan. She says it's simple. Just accuse him of abandoning the faith, bribe some false witnesses, then you can legally have him executed and just take his land. And this just shows you the deep corruption at the heart of that kingdom.
But an injustice this big could never go unnoticed. God sent a revelation to Idris, commanding him to go and confront the king directly, and the divine message was absolutely terrifyingly clear. Go to this oppressive servant of mine. I swear by my glory, I will take vengeance on you in the hereafter. Turn your honor to disgrace and make your wife's body food for the dogs.
So the confrontation plays out in these 5 stages. First, Idris delivers that chilling warning. The king, of course, is enraged and sends soldiers to kill him, but Idris escapes. Then comes the consequence. God withholds the rain, and for 20 years, a famine just cripples the entire kingdom. Finally, broken and starving, the people repent. They find Idris, beg him to pray, and with his prayer, the rains return, and the land is saved.
Okay, so that covers his earthly struggles. But now we're going to shift to his inner journey, which is, believe it or not, even more dramatic. Idris's devotion was so constant, so pure, that it attracted a very unique companion, Azrael, the angel of death. And this wasn't some kind of bad omen. It was a profound friendship born from a shared spiritual reality.
Now, to really understand this friendship, we need to get a key spiritual concept, the Azraeli power. Don't just think of it as physical death. Think of it as the universal power of detachment. It's the force that severs our connection to a lower state, like a bad habit or a worldly desire, so that we're free to rise to a higher one. It's basically the engine of all spiritual growth.
And you can actually see this concept in the simplest thing we all do, breathing. Every time you breathe out, that's a tiny dose of this Azraeli power. It's a letting go, a small death of that moment. And every time you breathe in, that's a renewal, a new life for the next moment. We live this cosmic cycle with every single breath we take.
Prophet Idris, being the ultimate teacher and student, wasn't satisfied with just the theory. His friendship with the angel of death led him to make one of the most audacious requests ever made. He said to Azrael, "I have a request. I wish to taste death. I've heard so much about it, but I want to know what it is."
And this was just the first part of an incredible cosmic tour. Guided by his angel friend, Idris would make a series of requests that pushed the very limits of what a mortal could experience. First, to go up to the heavens. Then, to actually taste death. Next, to witness the reality of hell. And finally, to enter the gardens of heaven.
So, by God's permission, the angel of death briefly took his soul. When Idris came back to his body, Azrael asked him what it was like, and his response was chilling. He said the experience was infinitely more severe and more difficult than any description he had ever heard. It was a reality that words just couldn't capture.
Next on the tour, he was shown a glimpse of hell. The sight was so overwhelming, the reality of divine justice so terrifyingly real, that this great prophet, a man of immense spiritual strength, fainted from the sheer horror of what he saw.
Finally, he was granted entry into heaven. He walked through its gardens, he ate of its fruits, and he experienced its absolute bliss. And when Azrael told him it was time to leave, Prophet Idris did something astounding. He refused. He just said, "I am not leaving." Azrael was obviously confused, but Idris, the master of divine law, began to lay out a perfect legal case, using God's own words as his evidence. Point 1. God has decreed that every soul will taste death. Well, I've now fulfilled this decree. I have tasted it. Check.
Point 2 followed with the same flawless logic. God has also decreed that every soul must pass over hell. You showed it to me. I've passed over it. The second decree is fulfilled. Check.
And then the final, unbeatable point. And God says of those who enter heaven, they will not be removed from it. I have entered. Therefore, by your own law, I cannot be removed. I'm not leaving.
At that exact moment, a revelation came directly from God to the angel. "Leave him," God said. "Idris argued using my own words, and he has prevailed, because it was I who taught him this argument, this high station, this early entry into paradise. It was always my plan for him."
So, why is the story so important for us? Because it's not just an incredible ancient tale. The life of Prophet Idris isn't some dusty, closed book of history. His legacy, from the foundations of civilization all the way to mastering the self, is alive and deeply relevant to us right here and now.
That incredible state of detachment he mastered, that Azraeli power, that's not just some historical fact about him. It's a state of perfection that we can all strive for. By building an inner connection to his story, by trying to emulate his focus, we can actually start to tap into that same strength in our own lives.
But that can feel like a really big task, right? Where do we even begin? How do we take the first step toward building this kind of inner connection with such a monumental spiritual figure? Well, the answer is actually beautifully simple, and it begins right now. Let's turn this from just passively learning something into an active connection. I invite you to join me in reciting the opening chapter of the Quran, Surah Al-Hamd, and together we can gift the spiritual reward of that recitation to the soul of Prophet Idris, the teacher.